Your Honor, I am excuse me for a second. I'm not that monster, I assure you, that people have portrayed me to be. Kendy and I had 28 years together and raised a family, had mostly a good marriage and a good life. I worked away from home all the time, and I was gone, and that was probably the gist of most of my problems, that I was gone. But I'm not that animal that they portrayed me to be, and that monster. And I couldn't have been that monster for 28 years and not be here before the court, way before him. It is not my intention to anger the court or disrespect the process that I used to believe in and work for. But Your Honor is about to sentence an innocent man to prison. And I love my wife, and I miss her. And I love my in-laws, Jamie and Wendell, and my stepdaughter, Brooke, who I raised since an infant, and her daughter, Kinley, that I helped raise for 5 years when we took them into our house. And I will miss them very much. I do miss them. Words cannot describe the pain that I feel for that. I stand before you, a shell of a man I used to be. Hell, I don't even have a shell left. My wife took her life. My will to live went down significantly. And when the jury found me guilty of crimes I didn't commit, it went down even further. And Mr. Johnson touched on this. I appreciate the court taking into consideration my service to the country as a Marine with an honorable discharge, to the state of Idaho for over 20 years, in which I was decorated multiple times for saving lives, not taking them, for service to the community through coaching football and baseball for many years, and being a 4-H leader for many years. We provided 1,000 animals to kids in this community to take to the fair and show. We were very involved. I volunteered to help the seniors in the community north of me. Every time there was a windstorm, I'd cut trees from the driveway, from around the house. I volunteered a lot. And to the frustration of my wife sometimes, because I was gone even more away from home. I didn't ask those people to write letters into the court because I didn't want to burden them. So that's why I'm telling you that now. I've successfully completed probation before, like Mr. Johnson has said, and I can successfully complete probation and parole in the future, I assure you. I just want to reiterate that I still love Kendy's side of the family, Janie, Wendell, Brian. I still love my stepdaughter. I miss them very much. I love my side of the family, my son Wyatt, my dad John, my sister Diane. I will miss them very much. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Well, I want to start by addressing why we're here. Defense counsel mentioned, what the jury found or didn't find. We're here for sentencing on a conviction of second-degree murder and a conviction of domestic violence, a felony. And what the jury found, Mr. Howard, is that you murdered your wife. Now, why they found it a second-degree murder versus first-degree was, I'm not there in the jury room, but they didn't find beyond a reasonable doubt the one element of premeditation. But there's no doubt that they found that they found specifically, it was part of the charging documents and part of the jury instructions, that you asphyxiated your wife, that you strangled her, that you killed your wife. And so the state has argued a lot about, we don't know exactly what happened that night, how she obtained the bruising, the burn, the broken jaw, and your attorney disputes the state's version of how she got those injuries. We don't know for sure. But what we know, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that you strangled your wife, you murdered her, and then you staged her naked body in the bathtub, shot her through the mouth, and tried to pass this off as a suicide. That's proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And, often in horrible crimes like this, everybody wants to know why. And often we don't know why. And I can't get inside your brain, but the pretty clear evidence, I agree with the state, is that this was due to, jealousy, greed, pride, anger, revenge, some combination of that. And because of that, you killed your wife. And you killed her in a brutal manner. And as I think about it, when you killed your wife, when you killed Kendy, you didn't just kill your wife. You killed a mother, you killed a grandmother, you killed a sister, you killed a daughter, you killed a coworker, you killed somebody who brought a lot of life and light to those around her and those she touched. And you snuffed that out because of your own pride, greed, and anger. This is without the state proving necessarily, and they don't have to, without them proving exactly how she received what they describe as this beating, without them proving exactly how she ended up with a body so badly bruised, with a broken jaw, with a burned arm. Set that stuff aside. We know you strangled your wife, you killed her, and you staged her to look like a suicide. We don't have to know the answers to all those other things to understand this was a heinous, outrageous murder. And from my view of the evidence and from what came out, despite your efforts at the time to appear emotional and sad and distraught, it's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that lightly at all, because we don't like to think that anybody would be like that. But you're not sorry, and I don't. The way you treated her family, the way you treated your own family, your own stepdaughter, your granddaughter, with a cold and callous contempt after the murder, it belies your argument to me today that you love these people and that you're sorry. As Brooke indicated, you never even talked to her about this after the fact. Your behavior towards her was contemptuous and unkind. And I'm not sentencing you for that. There was a lot of stuff that came in at the trial as to how you treated people after the fact, and how you treated your stepdaughter after the fact, and not allowing your granddaughter to get items that were meaningful and significant. But that's not why you're being sentenced today. But that does point to the remorse, the lack of remorse, the lack of caring, and just the callous disregard that you had for Kendy and how her death affected those around her. I'm always guided in sentencing by the Toohill factors, State versus Toohill, as well as, and those factors are codified in Idaho Code 1925-21. The goals of sentencing include the primary consideration of the protection of society, followed by the possibility of risk reduction through rehabilitation, deterrence of the individual and the public generally, and punishment or retribution for wrongdoing and the impact on the victim. And so I want to talk about those briefly. In terms of protection of society, I mean, obviously society has to be protected from somebody who's willing to commit the ultimate crime of murder. If, as you say, if they feel threatened, you didn't even feel threatened. This is over, again, most likely, elements of greed and anger and revenge. Someone who responds to, you know, I understand your wife was leaving you after many years of marriage. Your wife had engaged in a relationship with another man, and you were getting divorced. And I don't pretend that would be easy to go through. But this happens to a lot of people, and your reaction was murder. And so society, to protect society from somebody like that, certainly demands prison. I look at the possibility of risk reduction through rehabilitation. And to be frank, in your case, rehabilitation is not a factor. I'm considering that significantly. And again, this might be a different case if you were, 25 years old. But you're 58 years old, and I don't know how to say this without just sounding mean, but I mean, this is who you are. When I read the PSIs, I read that, and these are, obviously the PSI included a lot of reports, but these are actual quotes you gave to law enforcement 10 years ago. I read the PSI, and when I'm thinking about rehabilitation, when I was reading these, a couple things jumped out at me. This is, and I'm reading from page 79 of the PSI, the first one I got, page 79 of 162. When this is your neighbor who you were angry with. Now this is him. I said these were quotes from you. This isn't a quote from you. This is what he says you told him. Wood claimed Daniel Howard yelled at him, "I don't know where you are at, but I'm going to find you and kill you, you fucker. You fucked up my life. When you least expect it, I will find you." And then when confronted about this, among a number of things you said, this is a text you sent to another individual, quote, "I used incredible restraint because the weasel fuck is still breathing." So this is 10 years ago. You're talking about somebody is still alive because you used incredible restraint. During the interview, you were asked if you had threatened to splatter Mr. Wood's brains across the wall. You denied the statement and said the following, quote, "I don't know how many people I told that he's lucky that basically he's breathing because I choose to let him to. Dumb, I mean, I never threatened to kill him." But you were telling people he's breathing because you choose to let him to. You went on to say, and then this really jumped out at me because this is 10 years before you murder your wife. You say, "He's damn lucky I'm a fucking stable guy," or I could just imagine myself. I look back at these guys and I'm thinking, you know these guys that get put in prison because they killed their old ladies who they were fucking around with? I'm like, you know what? Man, I understand a certain amount why now. Those thoughts going through my mind, yeah, it's not illegal to think that, let me tell you something. And so 10 years before, you're saying you understand guys killing their wives. And then 10 years later, you do it. Or in the neighborhood of 10 years. So that was page 29 of 162. This is on page 95 of 162. And this is the sergeant's comments as part of this interview with you about your behavior, the stalking behavior that they were investigating of your neighbor. It says, "During this long pause, Daniel Howard attempted to look disgusted and in emotional pain, but appeared feigned, and he would abruptly recover to continue his interview." Interestingly, I read in the PSI writer experienced this as well. On page 18, it says, "Numerous times during his interview, he appeared to be feigning emotions of sadness, but he would quickly change his demeanor and direct the conversation back to himself." And it's like, wow, this is what we saw at trial. This is what let me back up. I don't mean literally in the trial, although that was certainly, I think there were times you tried to create emotions and were feigning them, but whatever. Your attorneys indicated that part of your disinterest was a trial strategy. So I'm not putting a lot of stock in that. But we saw at trial your efforts the night that you murdered your wife to feign this sadness and these emotions. And it was pretty obvious to see through. But what jumped out at me is seeing that you did this 10 years ago. And that you had these same thoughts. You were talking about allowing people to live through your own self-control and restraint. understanding why people would kill their, quote, old ladies and go to prison. And so you're 58 years old. I don't see a lot of rehabilitation, sadly, in your future. Maybe, perhaps, but that's not a significant mitigating factor in sentencing you. Deterrence of the individual and the public generally, certainly I consider deterrence. People need to know, and usually, we talk about specific deterrence, that's deterring the person who's in front of me. And then we talk about general deterrence, which is deterring, the community as a whole and the public as a whole. And I almost rarely talk about deterring the public as a whole, because usually people don't pay attention to what's happening on a day-to-day basis here in court. But in your situation, people are. And the public needs to know that there is a severe punishment for murdering your wife. And there's no sort of mitigation because the marriage is on the rocks or the wife was unfaithful or things like that. There's absolutely no justification here for murdering your wife. And I think it's important that the sentence sends that message as well. And then finally, punishment or retribution for wrongdoing and the impact on the victim. As has been noted by our courts, a judge really only has complete information when it comes to retribution and deterrence, because those are based on the nature of the offense. I can't otherwise get inside your head. And there's a lot that went on in this case that we don't know. We don't know how, Kendy got the injuries on her feet, on her head, all over her body. There's a lot of those things we don't know. But what I know beyond a reasonable doubt is that you strangled or asphyxiated your wife. You murdered her. You staged her body to be found as if it were suicide. It's an outrageously egregious murder. And of course, all murder is, but this is particularly heinous in my view, having sat through the trial and seen all the evidence. Sometimes the nature and gravity of the offense standing alone is sufficient to justify a fixed life sentence. And that is what I'm going to impose here. I think Kendy's family deserves to have that closure. The crime is so egregious that I don't think you should be released at any point in the future. And I don't impose that lightly. I have thought long and hard about this, considered all the evidence, considered aggravation and mitigation. There's just so little mitigation here. There's just really none. And so I do find that a fixed life sentence is appropriate for the count of murder in the second degree. On the domestic violence charge, I'll impose 10-year sentence and run it concurrent. I didn't even speak about that. Really, I'm not, I don't mean to give that charge short shrift. The jury found that you were violent and abusive to your wife as well. It's just that, frankly, the killing alone subsumes it all in my view. And so I'm running that, the domestic violence charge of 10 years will run concurrent with your life sentence. The final thing I want to say, Mr. Howard, usually when I sentence people, I try to give some element of hope or encouragement to change for the future, because we want to see that in people. And I'll simply say that nobody, as long as they're alive, is beyond redemption. Nobody is beyond the capability of changing, and so you're not beyond redemption. But in this case, that will have to happen within the walls of a prison. I would hope for that for you. But given the egregious crime you committed, this heinous murder, I do find that fixed life is the appropriate sentence. So that will be the order of the court. You do have the right to appeal my decision. Sir, you would have to file an appeal within 42 days. Anything further from the state? Mr. Johnson? Thank you. We'll be in recess.
All rise.